for Life podcast. We have a special treat today. We're here with Beth Koep. Beth, you are a clinical supervisor at a community mental health provider, but that's not why you're here on this podcast today. You have helped us here on the staff here at Real Life Ministries with learning more about EI, or emotional intelligence. So let me ask you a question. There are many that believe that in leadership or even success as a whole, that it's more important to be higher at EI than even IQ. What's your thoughts on that?
It is absolutely important. Leadership is about relationships, motivating, helping people grow, get behind something, an idea, get excited, want to move. And if you don't know what makes people tick and how they roll, then you aren't going to get your leaders to go very far. And so a big part of motivation is emotions. Your emotions are motivate your behaviors. And so if you're wanting people to change what they're doing, you need to understand their feelings, and to lead that, you need to know your feelings to help get people excited and on board for that.
So emotional intelligence is versus like IQ. So I could be a smart person, but if no one wants to hear what I have to say or care what I have to say, then I'm like a tree that falls in the forest and no one's there. So emotional intelligence is the ability to connect with other people.
That is a big part of it. Emotional intelligence, that's kind of a piece of it. The bigger piece is actually understanding your own first. If you're going to really do well and helping lead others, you got to understand who you are first. And so self-awareness is like the cornerstone of emotional intelligence, because then if you understand how you tick, you can start to understand other people better too.
So before we get into self-awareness, which is fascinating, basically, if I know what my emotions are and I can use that, I'm going to be able to communicate way clearer to those people, because I would think that if I'm kind of fractured, where I have a external face and an internal emotions and they don't match, then people are going to think that I'm not trustworthy, or they feel like I'm not giving them the straight scoop.
So if I was like, Lance, I'm so happy today.
Right.
I'm so excited you're here. Nobody believes you.
Right.
And so really your feelings match your physical sensations. And so people read you all day long. And so if they don't match, they don't believe you, and you're not trustworthy. And if you're not trustworthy, no one's following you.
And furthermore, if you're matching, then I feel safe to break down my walls, give you who I am, be more vulnerable.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's really good. So now there are several different competencies in emotional intelligence. We're not going to go over all of them. And in fact, they are disputed depending on who you follow. Could be 16, could be 20. But the list, at least we were trained on, the one that I really found fascinating was self-awareness, because it feels like it would be difficult to get better at being self-aware if that's what you struggle with.
Right. It is. So it's a longer process usually, especially if you're not used to thinking that way. And sometimes people don't take the time to slow down and go, what just happened there? They just decide other people suck. Like, everybody sucks. Well, if you're the common denominator in all those situations, are you a piece of what's happening? And if you're a piece of what's happening, do you even understand how you affect the environment and the reactions that are taking place? So self-awareness takes usually some feedback from other people, and being good at taking feedback is really hard. Especially because it requires a lot of vulnerability. We have a really high shame factor. And shame makes us want to hide and run away, and it's one of those emotions that are really powerful that makes us not want to look in the mirror. If I look in the mirror, I have to admit what's happening. And then you add a little fun extra guilt on top of that, because you have how it hurts the people around me when that's not what I mean to do. And so being really willing to look at that is painful.
So the guilt and shame comes from once you have some realization that this has been going on, then you have guilt and shame over the fact that your memory brings back times where maybe this was the situation and you didn't do it right, and now there's hurt feelings and maybe even broken relationships because you were not self-aware in the first place.
Right. And even for you, I'm not good enough comes up. And so I'm not good enough is really hard. That's why we have Jesus, and we have answered that differently as Christians. But self-awareness takes the ability to say, I'm not good enough. I have places I have to grow, and it's okay to be growing. But that's not something we really have in our culture. We are put together, you have it right now. You should know this. You hear a lot of shoulds when we have shame and guilt going on.
And we also assume the other people, I don't know if it's because of social media or it's just the way our minds work, we think the other person across the street or our neighbor has it figured out and we don't. We're the only ones that don't have it figured out.
Yep. And everybody's noticing everything I'm doing all the time because they're definitely thinking about me.
Right.
No.
Right.
They're way in their own head about themselves.
Right.
A good chunk, but we assume everybody's paying attention and everybody notices.
You know, Beth, when we're talking about self-awareness, I always think about a movie with Jimmy Stewart. It was actual true story, but it was called The Flight of the Phoenix. And these guys are in a bomber, and they look at their gauges, and their gauges say that they should be in a different place than they think they are. But so what they do is they ignore their gauges and they end up going too far and actually crashing. And the story does not end well. But it all comes down to they trusted their own feelings more than the feedback that they were getting from their gauges. And that sounds like the difference in self-awareness is you have to. I know I tell myself this, or it seems like this, but I have trusted people. Now, I would think, those gauges in The Flight of the Phoenix, I would think that you would select, in order to get better, a handful of people that you trust that understands the ins and outs of what you're going through.
Absolutely. So feedback and who you get it from is really important. Our culture loves to say feelings are truth. They aren't. In fact, a good part of therapy is learning how to bring facts and feelings together instead of picking one or the other. Wisdom is having truth and your feelings. God has both of those things. He gave us both of those things. So how do I use both? If I have one or the other, I end up in trouble. And so having people who aren't just going to fuel your feelings is really important, because sometimes you just want someone to justify what you're saying.
Right.
Which you need that for a moment, but then you need people who are a little bit more removed. In fact, it's really advisable your feedback be from somebody who's not emotionally invested in whatever issue it is you're getting feedback about. And so being able to trust your gauges is really important. As a Christian, you want somebody that's putting God's word, not what the culture's saying, as your gauge. So I also think having some variety in age is important, because you have things that are offered and people being in different seasons of life. If you talk to everybody who's newly married, love is wonderful. It's fantastic. Isn't it great? Versus you talk to somebody who's been married for 20 years, what's it look like? They have a different insight. And so having some variety in your gauges of people who are grounded in God's word is really important. But their delivery system is just as important. If they deliver with shame, you're not going to hear that, and then it's not helpful to you. And also, not people who think they know it all, but maybe people who are really good at asking questions. The more you can get to it, the more your brain holds to it.
I think that's really good advice, and not talking about shame because or shaming you when they're trying to give you feedback, because then the reality is the weight of the shame, you can't hear the truth of what they're saying because you're dealing with the weight of their shame.
Right. And your limbic system is really a cool deal, but your limbic system is designed to protect you. To say, if I was a jerk, and I'm not today, but if I were to chuck a ball at your face, you're going, you'd protect your face. You have these reflexes. Well, we have emotional reflexes the same way. And so when someone's chucking shame, I'm protecting myself, I'm not learning. And when that limbic system, that fight, flight, freeze is running, I am not in a learning mode. And so I need to have people that I feel safe enough with that I can learn and not be defending myself the whole time. To know that I'm loved, respected, cared about, and it's okay to be in process. But I need people who think the same way. They're not like, you should be here. Things more like, have you considered Did you look at it from this side? What might be that perspective? What are other places you've seen this happen before?
That's really good. Now, we originally were talking about emotional intelligence. If you understand what your emotional base is, really how you're feeling and why you're feeling those things, and you could communicate that in strength and be very effective. What would you tell somebody that has a hard time connecting with their emotions, or they might even be trying to protect themselves from their own emotions? They first have to go there. What do you tell that person?
So typically, I remove shame. So we talk a lot about it's okay that feelings are uncomfortable for you. You learned that somewhere. So either your family thought it wasn't okay, it was unsafe, or you may have something more significant like trauma. A lot of people who don't touch feelings, there's reasons for that. And so when you go to face them for the first time, they can feel overwhelming because I've dismissed them or judged them as not necessary, which you can judge your gaslight on your dashboard of your car as unnecessary, but there's consequences for that. Same with your feelings. They're telling you something, or they're telling you you're perceiving something. So you need to pay attention to it. Doesn't mean it's always accurate, but you need to pay attention to it. So beginning that process, really one of our cheese-tastic phrases that makes sense is called naming it to tame it.
Okay.
So naming your feelings is a great place to start. But doing that's really hard if you've never done it before. So getting a list of emotions. And there's lots of things that people label as feelings that aren't. I'm really stressed. Stress is not an emotion. It's a thought. I'm anxious. I'm disgusted. I am scared. You have feelings. So getting a list of feelings sometimes and looking at it can be helpful. Depending on how long it's been and how intense it is, you may need some extra outside help, but not everybody does. The other thing would be slowing down long enough to pay attention to them.
Which has got to be difficult in this culture.
Oh, yeah. Making time for it and the space is really hard. The other is it takes a little bit more than we probably have time for in this podcast, but your body sensations and what you want to do are really big clues. Emotions motivate behaviors, and so feelings and behaviors have a pair. So, like, for example, a couple examples would be like fear makes me want to escape. So I don't know what my feelings are, but I know I want to escape. That's a clue to you that you might be having some fear go on. And escaping looks different to everybody. Maybe I'm checking out in a daydream fantasy, or I actually leave the situation, I end the relationship, I quit the job, whatever it might be. Or it might be disgust. Disgust I want to get away from or reject. So our actions have a tie to our feelings, and so there's a connection there. So if I don't know what I'm feeling, I can start to know I know what I want to do, and I can backtrack to the feeling.
So you either we have these emotions. We all have these emotions. So we have an option to deal with them, which is a process. I would think that that's where you get involved in counseling. We have an option to deal with them, or it sounds like they will deal with us.
Yep. The example I use often with my clients is it's like a beach ball. If I push the beach ball under the water, it doesn't make the beach ball go away. And eventually I'm going to get tired. It's going to pop up. And the reality is the more pressure I put on that beach ball, the higher it's going to rocket.
Right.
And the higher it rockets, you just hope no one's around you, then they don't get slammed in the face with it.
Right.
And so they come up. Everybody's suppression and expression of their feelings looks different. It could be eating, could be a lot of sins. You're coping. A lot of our sins are unhelpful, ineffective coping, which is why God says don't do it.
Right.
He's like, I've got a way for you to do this. I've made a way for you to do this. I gave you those feelings. You can deny they're there, but you still need them. And they're motivating behavior. So often, if you've got a reoccurring sin that you're like, I just can't get past this, likely you have an emotion that's being unaddressed in there, which ties to some thoughts.
He gave us the emotions as a response to our environment. A lot of times the environment actually was sin, or could have been something that happened to us. It put us in a victim situation.
Yeah.
But the way that our body is coping with that fact, I guess, is would be called emotions. Is that right?
Your emotions are going to be the motivator to deal with it. So I was shamed for, let's say, being short. And so now I don't want to put myself in front of the classroom because I got there and some kids made fun of me. So I'm not good enough because I'm short. And so now I don't want to get in front of the class. So my emotion motivated the behavior of withdrawing and hiding. So now I won't take risks in speaking in front of people, but maybe God really wants me to because he's got something to say through me, but I'm too busy being afraid because of this hurt back here.
Wow. But the reverse would be true. If you dealt with it, now you're an overcomer. And you can identify with other people that maybe have a different cycle, different cause and effect. But you can at least talk to those people and connect with them and maybe help them.
Right.
So basically, not only is emotional intelligence the difference of being able to move people or lead people or disciple people, but the foreknowledge of how to deal with your emotions seems like a primary function to be able to master.
Absolutely. Yep. If I don't understand my process, then I couldn't maybe possibly understand where you are. If I don't know how to ask myself questions, how do I ask questions of someone else? It is the starting place. Because the other thing that's going to happen when you're in a relationship is other people are going to hit your stuff.
Right.
And if you aren't aware your stuff's getting hit, then it's really not helpful that you're going to have your reflexes and reflexive responses, which may shut them down. So if you want to stop the shutdown cycle, then you have to be able to help yourself stop first. And I think one of the big things that emotions come from are core values. So I have these responses when someone violates, neglects, or honors my values. So if I really love service and somebody does something for me, it's like, whew, fills my tank that happy and that love comes out. If someone never does anything for me and I'm always the one having to do the dishes every single time, nobody ever, anger, disgust start to fuel.
Right.
And so then the way I treat that person changes. And some of those kinds of things. So understanding a lot of times when I'm having an emotional response, if I can backtrack to a value, I can understand what's going on, which then helps bring that reason and emotion together, and I can go, is this something I need to be offended about, or can I move past it? Which in our culture is really big. How do we work with a culture that's going to offend us on a regular basis in a place where we're less welcome, less wanted, and our stances are less accepted? And we've moved from that's weird to you hate people if you think that.
Right.
Which is at the core opposite of what we believe. And so how do I learn to not be offended enough to stay engaged with a culture that doesn't like me?
That is a great question. That is a great point about the culture. I don't want to make it sound like I'm as old as I am, but it does seem in recent years that the importance that emotions are given, how I feel is given, versus other things that I may know or even think about or even be. It feels like this culture has stopped becoming curious because they are so fascinated by the way that they're feeling right there and right then as a reaction to whatever kind of stimulus it is. How do you deal with or as a disciple maker, as somebody that's trying to lead other people and counsel other people, how do you deal with a over-emotional, and I wouldn't say over-emotional, an oversensitized culture?
Yeah, so I think, again, being aware of your own feelings is really important. If you don't have an understanding what's happening for you, you're not maybe good for someone else. And so the conversation is, how do I recognize shame, fear, anger, whatever those feelings are in the other person? And sometimes not saying what you're feeling is right, but recognizing their emotions and helping them do it helps them to come down. So I can tell you're really angry right now. Doesn't mean like, yes, 3-year-old, because you're angry about the cookie, I should give you the cookie. But it does, helping them identify their feelings is going to help their reason come into play. So, which they're not going to do unless you can be with them and their feelings. So as I'm sure parents or spouses have ever done, you hate me. No, I don't. Here's all the reasons. Right. And you end up in the cycle of, how am I making this worse? Because you're bringing logic to someone who's highly emotional. You need to meet them with emotions and then come down. They will come and their reason will click back in.
So you're saying that we could actually do this even for ourselves, is I reacted, or I'm having a strong reaction about whatever the stimulus is. Instead of just in your own mind, or when you're dealing with like you use an example of parents, I think that's really good, is instead of dealing with the emotion, it is, that's interesting, or that's interesting, I reacted that way. What did that mean to me, or why did it? Because it kind of goes back to your beach ball analogy. It's basically the beach ball is leaking out, and you're having this strong reaction, and we get so focused on this reaction, and really it's just more of a warning light to due to something else that actually might be a hurt that might need to be dealt with.
Right. Or like I recognize, so anger's motivation is to step in. Because it'd be really weird. You don't see anybody go, I'm so angry at you.
Right.
So I'm angry at you.
Right.
Right? We have this emotion. Again, depending on your home, your anger might be, I'm angry. Depending on if it was expressive or not. And so I'm going, ooh, I want to step in. Why? What's happening back here? Am I feeling, because we have a list of like prompting events. Am I being attacked? Do I think someone else is being attacked, or someone getting in the way of my goal? So if I'm looking at anger and I really break that down, I can go, ooh, I'm angry. Is my kid attacking me? Are they telling me I'm a terrible parent, or are they just mad about not getting to go out? Okay, I can step away from this a little bit, because I can go back to, what do I think's happening? Is that true? Or is it not true? And sometimes that's why I need outside people, because maybe I don't know. Am I being ridiculous as a parent right now with this rule? Do I need to check in with my spouse on that? Do I need to maybe have a good friend and look like we're getting in this fight all the time? Is this a hold the line because I'm disciplining my child and this is developing character? Or holding the line because I'm fighting about something I don't need to be fighting about?
Because one of my core values that I didn't even realize was a core value has been stepped on, and I heard it that way, even though maybe they didn't even say it that way.
Right, because respect is you always do what I say.
Right.
Cool, but now you've produced a kid who can't think for themselves.
Right.
So then you put them in college, and they're looking for the next person to tell them what to do, and then she finds the guy that does tell her what to do.
Right. Which doesn't end well.
No, and so some of that is, how do I learn to share power but stay the parent, and at what age, and how do I do that, which is debatable by a whole bunch of different things, and each kid is different, and each situation's different, each culture's different. Handing a kid a phone now versus 15 years ago, what they have access to. I mean, so you're having to make different decisions, but again, shame, right? Some of those pieces coming in, but understanding what's happening inside means I keep control instead of giving my feelings the ability to just explode me wherever, and then I don't have ruined relationships, and I don't have the respect because my kid just looks at me as someone who explodes on them, and they don't talk to me anymore.
Well, this has been really good. These are, real deep things to think about. I mean, so much of this culture, you look at memes and TikTok videos, and it's just your brain doesn't even have to think at this level. But I think I think the things that you've talked about really are getting in the way of us being successful people, meaning having relationships and being good at that. You've been a member here for a long time. In fact, you actually teach teach classes here on this topic.
Yes.
And coming up, like maybe in the fall, you're going to be doing more.
Yeah. So it looks like in the fall, I teach about a 8 to 10 week class on emotional intelligence, in particular, to help dive into this a bit more. I will say it does feel like we're bouncing when we do it a little bit, because really super in depth is counseling. It really does look like engaging counseling, but there's some great tools to kind of come and see what it looks like and how it might be able to help you. I think, we don't know for sure, might be on Thursday nights, but I don't know yet.
Well, I appreciate coming on today, and I would like to do this again. This is a great topic, and certainly a lot of material to go over, and so we'll plan on doing that. But I appreciate coming in, and I guess the one takeaway that people could have is I feel this way, and just being curious in your own mind of why I feel that way.
Yeah. Instead of judging it, treat it with curiosity.
That's really good. Thanks a lot, Beth.
Yep. All right.